My mother abandoned me at 13 for another man. Years later, she came back begging for a place to live. But when she didn't pay and started ruining my reputation, I sued her, and the judge destroyed her. I'm 29 years old. I run two art supply stores that I inherited from my father. And I need to tell this story because what happened a few months ago still has me processing whether I did the right thing or if I'm really the heartless son. My mother says I am. The truth is, this whole drama started like 16 years ago, when I was 13 and my mom decided our life wasn't enough for her. But I guess I should start there, so you understand why things ended up the way they did. When I was 13, my mom was a personal trainer at a gym in town. My dad, Thomas, had a small art supply shop that basically kept us afloat, but it's not like we were swimming in money, you know? We lived well. I mean, we had what we needed, but we weren't rich or anything like that. One day I came home from school and my mom was packing suitcases, and when I asked her what was going on, she told me, with a coldness that still gives me chills, that she was leaving with a guy named Ryan she met at the gym. Just like that, as if she was commenting on the weather. I remember I tried to ask her why, what we had done wrong, but she just kept folding clothes and stuffing things in the suitcase like I wasn't even there. My dad came home like an hour later and found the house half empty and me sitting on the stairs, crying. And I don't know. I think something broke in him at that moment too. The next few years were basically my dad and me against the world, like the two of us trying to keep the shop running while I stayed in school. I'm not gonna lie, it was tough. There were months where we barely had enough to eat because sales were low, and my dad worked like 12 hours a day trying to keep everything afloat. I started helping at the store after school, organizing inventory, attending customers, stuff like that. My mom never called, never asked how we were, nothing. It was like we had ceased to exist for her. Sometimes I wonder if she ever thought about me during those years, but honestly, I don't think she did. And that's what hurts the most, you know? When I was like 16, something happened that changed things. Uncle Richard, my dad's brother, died in a car accident. We weren't super close to him because he lived in another state, but turns out he left us $150,000 in his will. My dad almost fainted when the lawyer gave us the news. He literally had to sit down because he turned pale. With that money, my dad could finally breathe a little. He paid off all the debts we had, improved the store, bought better inventory, and when I turned 18, he bought me a small apartment near the university where I was going to study. I remember when he gave me the keys, he said, "This is so you have your own space and don't have to worry about rent while you study." And I started crying right there, because after all those hard years, I finally felt like things were going to be okay. The store started doing better and better. My dad opened a second location, in a nearby town when I was in my second year of college, and things were really taking off. I was studying business administration, thinking that eventually I was going to help my dad manage the business, and on weekends, I still worked with him. It was our project, you know what I mean? Everything we had built together after my mom abandoned us. And then, right when I was in my last semester of college, my dad called me one day and told me he had to go to the doctor because he wasn't feeling well. I thought it was something minor, like the flu or something. But it turned out to be cancer. And not just any cancer. It was stage 4. The doctors said it was already very advanced, that there was metastasis in several organs, and basically that there wasn't much to do except chemotherapy to give him more time. The next few months were a nightmare. I was trying to finish college while watching my dad deteriorate more and more. He lost a ton of weight. His hair fell out, where he could barely get out of bed. I was running both stores practically alone while trying to keep my grades up and take care of my dad. I barely slept, lived basically on coffee and fast food, and I had this knot in my stomach the whole time because I knew I was going to lose him. My dad died 3 days before my graduation. I was 22 when I buried him, and it was like losing not just my father but my best friend, my partner, the only person who had been there for me since my mom left. Graduation was horrible. Honestly, I didn't even want to go, but I knew my dad would have wanted me to, so I went with the empty seat where he should have been and tried not to break down in front of everyone. My dad left me everything in the will: the 2 stores, the house, the apartment where I lived. He didn't have anyone else, I guess, and I was the one who had been with him until the end. I spent the next year basically on autopilot, managing the businesses, trying to keep everything running the way my dad would have wanted. The stores were doing well. Actually, we had built a good reputation and had loyal customers. I lived in my apartment, and my dad's house was basically closed because I couldn't even go in there without breaking down crying. And then, like a year after my dad died, guess who showed up? My mom, Patricia, showed up one day at one of the stores. I hadn't seen her in literal 9 years, and there she was, with the same blonde hair I remembered but more lines on her face, and with a teenager next to her who was like 14 or 15. I just stood there behind the counter, unable to process what I was seeing, and she acted like nothing, like almost a decade hadn't passed since the last time we saw each other. She introduced me to the kid, Lucas, my half-brother apparently, and told me she needed to talk to me in private. I don't know why I agreed. I should have kicked her out right there, but I think part of me was still that 13-year-old boy who wanted to know why his mom abandoned him. We went for coffee, and she told me her story. Turns out, Ryan, the guy she left us for, had left her like 2 years ago. She was working as a personal trainer again, but it wasn't enough for much, and she was basically living day to day with Lucas. She told me she had heard that my dad had died, that she was so sorry, blah blah blah, and then got to what she really wanted. She needed a place to stay temporarily, just a few months while she saved money for her own apartment. And she had heard I had an extra apartment. I couldn't believe it. Seriously, the audacity of this woman was incredible. She disappeared for almost 10 years, never asked about me, was never there when we needed her, and now she showed up asking for favors like nothing happened. I should have told her no right there, but I don't know. I think I felt sorry for Lucas. The poor kid wasn't to blame for having Patricia as a mother, and he looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. Plus, there was something in me that wanted to prove to her that I was a better person than she was, that I wasn't going to abandon family like she did. So I told her they could stay in the apartment where I had lived because I had moved into my dad's house a few months earlier. I made it clear it was temporary, 6 months max, and that she had to pay utilities because I wasn't going to support her. She agreed, thanked me a lot, and gave me a hug that made me feel weird, and they moved in that same week. The first 2 months were relatively quiet. Lucas started coming to the store after school. He seemed interested in art and was a good kid, honestly. And we started having a brotherly relationship. I taught him things about running the business, and he helped me with basic tasks. My mom worked at a gym and supposedly was saving for her own place. But then the problem started. First, it was that she didn't pay utilities for 1 month. And when I confronted her, she said she had unexpected expenses, that next month she'd pay everything together. Then it was another month and another. By the time we got to the 4th month, she owed me like $1,200 in utilities that I was paying out of pocket. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that she started talking to distant relatives of my dad's, people I barely knew, telling them her version of the story. According to her, I was an ungrateful son who had abandoned her when she needed me most, that my dad had filled my head with lies about her, that she had always wanted to be in my life but we wouldn't let her. I started getting messages and calls from uncles and cousins I hadn't seen in years, telling me how could I be so harsh with my own mother, that family should support each other, all that crap. I tried to explain the truth to them, but she had already planted seeds of doubt, and besides, nobody wants to hear that the mother is the villain of the story, you know? It's easier to think, the son is the problem. When she hit 6 months in the apartment, I went to talk to her. I reminded her of our agreement and told her she needed to leave, that she'd had enough time to save money. She started crying, told me she had nowhere to go, that Lucas was going to be homeless. How could I do that to my own brother? I stood firm and told her that wasn't my problem, that she'd had half a year to figure out her situation, but that's when she got really manipulative. She told me that if I kicked her out, everyone was going to know what kind of person I was, that she was going to ruin my reputation, that my customers were going to stop buying at my stores when they found out I had put my mother on the street. I was shocked, honestly, because right there I clearly saw who she really was and that she was never going to change. I went to a lawyer, Mr. Collins, who helped me prepare the eviction papers. He explained the whole legal process to me, told me she was probably going to fight it, but that I had the right to recover my property. We served her the eviction papers, and as expected, she rejected them and said she wasn't going to leave. She hired a free lawyer and basically sued me, arguing that I had promised her she could stay indefinitely, and now I was kicking her out for no reason. It was a lie, obviously, but that's how these things work. You have to go to court and let a judge decide. The 2 months before the hearing were horrible. My mom was in total smear campaign mode. She posted on social media about her cruel son who was putting her on the street, sent messages to store customers, called people in town telling her version. I got like 50 messages from people. Some I didn't even know, telling me I was a monster. There were customers who stopped coming to the stores. There were people who saw me on the street and avoided me. Lucas completely stopped talking to me, and that hurt because the kid wasn't to blame for any of this. There were nights where I wondered if I was doing the right thing, if I really was as bad as she said. But then I remembered everything that had happened, everything she had done to us, and I knew I had to stand firm. The day of the hearing came, and I was super nervous. Mr. Collins told me we had a solid case, that the temporary agreement was documented in text messages, that the utility debts were proven, that basically we had everything in our favor. But I was still anxious because I knew my mom was going to put on a show, and she's a good actress, honestly. We entered the courtroom, and there she was with Lucas, dressed very modestly, with red eyes like she'd been crying all morning. Her lawyer started with the story of the struggling single mother, who just wanted a place to raise her son, that I had offered her the apartment out of guilt, and now was kicking her out without compassion. When it was my turn to speak, Mr. Collins presented all the messages where it was clear it was temporary, the utility, receipts she didn't pay, testimonies from neighbors about the condition of the apartment she had let deteriorate. I told my version, how she had abandoned my dad and me, how she was never there during the hard years, how she only showed up when she needed something. My mom was crying dramatically while I spoke, denying everything, saying I was making things up because I was resentful. The judge asked her directly why she hadn't been in her son's life for almost 10 years, and she said my dad had kept her away from me, that she had tried to maintain contact but he wouldn't let her. Pure garbage. But she said it with so much conviction that for a moment I worried the judge would believe her. In the end, after like 3 hours of hearing, the judge ruled in my favor. He said, temporary housing agreements must be respected, that I had been more than generous giving her 6 months, and that the fact she didn't pay utilities showed lack of commitment to the agreement. He gave her 2 weeks to vacate the apartment completely. My mom became hysterical, started yelling that this was unfair, that the system was corrupt, that I had bought the judge with my money, all these crazy accusations. Security guards had to calm her down while Lucas just sat there looking miserable and embarrassed. They moved out like a week and a half later. They didn't let me know when they did it. They just left and dropped the keys in the mailbox. When I entered the apartment to inspect it, it was a disaster. Scratched walls, stains on the carpets, appliances beaten up. I had to spend like $3,000 on repairs and deep cleaning. But that was it. She was finally out of my life again, and this time, I was the one closing the door. It's been like 5 months since then. My mom still says on social media that I'm a terrible son, but fewer and fewer people pay attention because several relatives ended up finding out the complete truth and confronted her. Lucas sent me a message like 2 months ago, just to say he was sorry about all the drama and that he understood why I did what I did. I responded that he didn't have to apologize for anything, that the doors of my life are open for him whenever he wants to have a brotherly relationship without our mother's poison in between. He hasn't responded yet, but I hope someday he will. The stores are doing fine. Most of the customers who left came back when they realized the gossip was exaggerated. I hired a couple new employees, and I'm thinking about opening a 3rd location next year. I rented out the apartment, and now it generates passive income for me, so something good came out of this whole mess. There are still days where I wonder if I was too harsh, if I should have given her more chances. But then I remember that I gave myself the right to set boundaries with someone who hurt me, and that doesn't make me a bad person. My dad always told me that family isn't just blood, it's who's there when things get tough. And he was right. My family was my dad, and now it's the business we built together and the people I choose to have close. And that's enough.